as technology has allowed us to quantize to an exact measurement, we've lost that. And this is, I guess, kind of a spiritual question, but it's like or spiritual perspective, but like we've lost that internal, natural, individual rhythm. Like we have our own concept of time, each of us, right? So like for us to land everything onto a grid based on a quantization algorithm, we're actually subtracting our own internal rhythm. And that's what separates like the Jay Dilla groove from a Ninth Wonder groove, from a Madlib, from a Flume, from a, you know what I mean? Like if we remove that, we're it's kind of a purist way of thinking, but like it's interesting if we just had the BPM, because we obviously have to have some fencing, right? Like we have to have something that we can all, something that we can all like find a groove in. But if we're literally just protracting songs, then how do we differentiate besides just, oh, well, he turned up RC20? Yeah, right.
Yeah. I feel you, bro, because Miles Davis said it, man. He was like, time is everything, right? So like it's also having time, but it's the lack thereof sometimes, that space, that gap, that groove that adds the musicality that made his music so like great, you know what I mean? So I agree with you, dude. Like we're making it into, hey, get it, Luca.
I think it's one of the really interesting things about that is, and the reason why I brought that up was not only on the topic of experimentation, but because I'm sure, of course, we're all producers, we have our fucking writer's blocks, producer blocks. I found like the quickest technique for me to, I wouldn't say get rid of the writer's block, but at least try to like look deep into it and be like, get the fuck out of here, is just turn the grid off, like turn that shit off hard, change the time signatures and go in at it. I guarantee you will, that night, you will leave your writer's block and come back to whatever you want.
Are you talking about like with no click as well? Or is this just like totally free form?
Literally look at a white piece of paper and you can just drop a dot anywhere and you can just do exactly the same with music, and you just pick your sound, you pick your sample, you pick your instrument.
So would you like loop a sec, like there would be no loop, you're just like throwing everything on there kind of thing?
So you would do, if I remember last week, not even like a couple of weeks ago, what I did was I made an 8-bar loop. I made it 8 bars, and then what I did was I took that, Command D, did the duplication of the loop, and all I did was I just tried to nudge it a little bit left and right, and
find something.
Just enough nudging where your internal metronome is like, yo, there's a swing here.
There's a song.
I mean, I'll upload something and I'll send you guys a link, but it's like complete over experimentation. The more you just do that, it's like, okay, cool. And I think like that really helps even finding your own sound, because most of the time we get stuck to a particular sound. You might not have a writer's block, but you're just like, this is getting really stale. I'm making the same fucking loop all over and over and over again. But the moment you actually start to nudge things around a little bit here and there, you start to realize, yo, I can actually do some pretty weird shit. I should.
So when
yeah, go ahead, Terrence.
I was gonna say, so like when you do your drums, like do you just kind of like play it in and just see what you're feeling? Like you're obviously not like clicking that stuff in, right?
Exactly, like just play it in. And, yeah, and it's not even just like me. I know there's a few producers who do this really, really well, where they'll listen to something and they'll just slam the button. There's like, it has to go here. It just, my body tells me it has to go here, and I'm gonna put it here. There's no backspacing that. There's no changing that. You guys talk. Let me find that. Let me find something for you that I might have.
I mean, to be honest, a lot of like when I first started out, a lot of it was hip hop beats and stuff like that, and it was really just going off the drum pad. So a lot of times, even if you want to be quantized, you're not gonna be. Like, I don't care how perfectly timed you think you are with latency, button press, and honestly, at that point, it was cheap buttons I was pressing on. So, you know what I mean? Like, I think there's a certain human element when you're first starting out on cheap equipment that's kind of cool. Like, we talk about having the highest equipment and the most expensive microphones, but there's something about a USB mic that adds a certain saturation sometimes that, you know what I mean? It's like, it's a certain human element, and so many things that we do that we work so hard to get rid of sometimes. It's really funny. Like, we really work our asses off to try to make something sound super crisp, but in reality, if you go to a live concert or a live venue, most of the time it's not going to sound like that. So
Right. I think it's really interesting because we have, so, since recording audio became a thing, going back to like the recorder and, records, vinyl and all that, and just like 8-track boards and things like that, we were relying on performative, um, playing. Like that's how you come together. You just have a natural rhythm. You get together with a band and you say, okay, well, I provide this element, that element. Together we have our sonics. Then comes the digital age where you have computers getting involved with the timing of things, with the sound of things. Like you can use a sampler, you can use a beat machine, a drum machine. But now I think one thing that's changing more in the last 10 years, 15 years, is producing with a mouse and keyboard. Like I know so many producers now, and it's not wrong. I'm not going to come out here and say it's wrong because I believe that however we can create something dope for all of us to listen to, have at it. But as far as the approach to things, I've noticed, like I saw a tutorial on YouTube, as I'm sure many of you have seen, and it's even repeated in several of them, where it's like, take your hi-hats, nudge them to the right, it makes room for the kick, right? You'll have a quantized hi-hat, they'll tell you nudge it over a little bit, and it'll create this room for the kick to come through, the snare to come through, et cetera, et cetera. And it dawned on me, I'm like, what you're doing is you're trying to program natural rhythm by doing that, because you don't want everything, no person, it's like trying to draw a perfect circle, right? No human can like actually achieve that. I mean, there are some TikTok videos out there I've seen people do, but that's like one in a million.
There's always
right?
that one.
There's always that one guy.
Yeah, Nick, to your point, it's funny that you brought up the Enso. That's what it's called, Enso. That's actually a very ancient technique where I believe in Japan it was just completely off topic, but in Japan it was like, hey, how clear you are spiritually, you basically stand in front of a white thing, a canvas or something, you take a paintbrush and you have to take a go at drawing a perfect circle, and those people who were able to do a perfect circle were spiritually just bam. That's what the Enso is. So
right. Yeah. It's crazy that
it's hard. To your point, it's hard.
Yeah, it's hard. It's hard, and I think that it's so unique. I mean, think about some of the trends that are coming back into the fold, like lo-fi. Boom bap is starting to make a little bit of a presence on the SoundCloud spectrum. Like a lot of these producers that are, of a certain generation are introduced through the laptop method. Like they're not playing on keyboards necessarily, or they're not, using a drum pad and like, performing their parts. It's a lot more programmed. It's a lot more binary of an approach. And it's so interesting to see people achieving like natural rhythm through unlearning rather than, hey, let me try. Like with me, it was like, hey, get an MPC and like try to follow the sample, so I'm like playing it based on my internal rhythm, whereas a lot of these guys are just like, hey, this sample is not like quantized, what's up with this? Like I have to now unquantize my work. Like it's a completely backwards approach, and I think it's really interesting to see that.
I love it. I love how you said the unlearning part, because I've had these conversations with a lot of producers, and one of the things that I don't know if you guys know this, but music making is the only activity in the entire universe that actually utilizes your entire brain.
Wow.
It is the only thing in the entire world that actually utilizes your entire brain, your temporal lobes, your western hemisphere, your eastern, like, right, all that stuff, right? So to the point of unlearning, I think it's very, very important to psychologically remember that human brains are very in tune. They look for symmetry. And when you're making music, part of the reason why music becomes very stale, or that 8-bar loop becomes really stale, is because human brains are very, very attuned for symmetry. And when I was talking about breaking free of writer's block, the reason why I completely would change the timestamp, the time signatures, and the reason why I would completely turn off the grid is because you want to get off that symmetry for a second. It'll help you go into a completely new direction. Which, in my opinion, there are a lot of people out there who produce the most banger beats, but then you put them in front of somebody who turned the grid off or change the time signature, and they end up looking at that and they're like, dude, this is actually way better than what I produce, because you could do that and most people can't do that. So you can try that. It really helps.
Awesome way to look at it. And then the funny thing about that is, like, we've managed to take this conversation to such a personal creativity journey, and the problem is that as a lot of these, like, they fulfill us as creatives, right? But then we also have the yang to our yin, which is the industry, and how we have to create, as far as living in society and having like a livable wage and making things work in this industry. How do we allow ourselves to grow in one without compromising the other, and vice versa? Because no one in the industry, if you're trying to get on a commercial placement, is going to be like, oh well, give me this crazy ethereal untimed 808 with a pad and let's get it to Drake. It's just not going to happen.
Right, Drake. Drake ain't touching it, bro.
to your point, it's a thing that I'm actually working on, and I'd love to talk to you guys about this maybe on the next call or something, because I'm actually doing that right now on the other computer. But one of the things that stands out to me with regards to that is you try your absolute best to do really, really, really experimental, weird shit, because when you do that, what happens is that it actually forces people to rethink what they know about their own music tastes. Because you have people like Kanye. People hail him as a genius, but the reason why he's like that is because he just changes shit up every single time. Mm-hmm. And people are just like, Kanye is Kanye. So people are not really gravitating towards his sound more so than they are towards his actual personality and his originality. And I think that's super, super important when we talk about having a platform to say, okay, cool. Can I make something so that people can actually be lured to it or be drawn to it? And I think the best way to do it, yeah, Luca, Kanye is a sampling genius. And that's super important, because you can try to really make beats like everybody else, but you can change that up by maybe taking from something else, right?
I feel like the samples are important because, like you said, you want to be as unique as you possibly can, right? But while doing that, you're going to alienate your audience. So the samples are what hooks people into something they know, something they can remember, something they can feel, almost like nostalgia. You know what I mean? So I feel like Kanye does such a good job with that, because he looks at something like, whether it's church, growing up, maybe you went to church and it's a vibe you feel, he captures that for a moment, but then he adds that unique spin. He adds something to update it, refresh it, so people can feel something they haven't before. I feel like that's important, because we need people, tastemakers, trendsetters, to pave the way for us to be creative, because otherwise the world's just going to be, it's going to be the same pop song over and over again, the same song
over and over. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think. Sorry, yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it's interesting you mentioned Kanye. I think that he's unwilling to settle, and he doesn't stay stagnant. I think the moment that you start to just be satisfied, and you're just okay, and don't get me wrong, being satisfied with your work and a project is something else. Well, just being satisfied as a whole, right? So yeah, I mean, he doesn't. I think he's just relentless, and I think in terms of sort of he does change things up, but I think that if you really want to talk about someone who's just so I wouldn't say oblivious, but so I would say apathetic to what the market and what people want and care about, would be Childish Gambino. I mean, if you look at his latest album, 3:15:20, I mean it's ethereal. That's the best way for me to describe it. It's a mix of this ethereal gospel, just such heart. I mean, the guy's talking about how he sees the colors of his his father who passed when he meditates, and you can feel the energy in the music, but people weren't receptive to it. It's I think that you have to keep in mind that people sometimes are very things need to be easy to digest, and that I find is one of the most difficult things about being a producer, is that people are sometimes one-dimensional, and the fact that, you know, it is hard for people to digest certain things, makes it difficult to be successful. But that's where the true test comes in, right? That's where you're really being tested as a producer to be like, listen, like it might not be like receptive, like received in like mass circles, but it's what I love to make. And so like, yeah, Kanye in that sense, like he had really good success because he was able to keep it in the mainstream and he was able to see like what people liked. But I mean, yeah, if I really highly recommend that you check out Childish's stuff, especially like I'd say Awaken My Love and Forward, like that stuff is very like cool, especially BTI, BTI too, like because the internet also fantastic album, screenplay included. I'm like a huge fan of this.
He's talented, very talented actor too,
But I was actually something that I've been if you know what VCV rack is, but it's basically a Euro rack on the computer basically. And so instead of actually having to physically go and find modules and patch cables, you can just do it all on your computer through a program. So I want to know, you know, like when I listen to certain songs, for example, there's a really nice synth in Joji's Slow Dancing in the Dark. Really nice sawtooth synth, like something that I've always tried to recreate. And that drove me to sort of, you know, pick up sound design and like modular synthesis. So I wanted your takes, like your guys' take on that, your experience with modular synthesis, and what you're like, if you guys ever feel like you've gotten to the point where you think of a sound or you hear a sound and you're able to go from like the sound that you're hearing in your head to like synthesizing that in a DAW or in a, like for example in Massive or in you know, any sort of synthesizer.
Serum or one of those.
Yeah, Serum.
Cool. Adam, that's a great question. I am not as versed in the synthesis side of things. I am very interested because what you just said reminds me of like thematic sounds that I've heard in songs that I love, right? Like certain producers that have brought forth a specific, maybe even like a token or signature that came through, and you've seen like iterations of it happen as a result. Like the one that came to mind for me personally, being that I'm more in the hip hop commercial lane, was like the T- synth, the like lead that he would always use for his early production. I remember hearing that and like being able to associate that with a certain producer. And but I'm not personally as versed in the synthesis side of things, so I'm not sure. Like I want to learn it though, just like you said. I'm in the same boat as you. I want to learn how is it that we can approach this, and like what is the easiest way to, or program or product or whatever, to like start with the like sine, saw, you know, whichever, you know, type of wave it is, and then like build from there. So I'm in the same boat as you.
If you just for a suggestion, Nick, if you want to learn synthesis, I think a good idea would be to Adam was talking about Massive. Massive's it's a pretty straightforward synth, and it has a lot of different sounds and settings and stuff that you can play with, and you can add presets to it as well. I can send you, if you want to ever get Massive, I can send you, I think I have like, there's a pack that I had which had 150 extra presets on top of that. Ableton Operator, all my bass line, I have never ever used anything for bass lines except Operator, and Wavetable is amazing too. But yeah, so the beauty about synths is that you learn just one. You learn one, it's completely transferable to any synth, any synth. You have Rob Papin stuff. That's also really, really fun. Like you have the Yuhei stuff, Yuhei. Yeah, like there's a few synths that you can really start off with. And by all means, like feel free to like ask for suggestions. Other people probably have their own favorite.
I would chime in on that. I think there's definitely different types of synthesis, and learning like subtractive synthesis is probably most applicable to a lot of things. But then, you know, there's FM synthesis and all that stuff, which gets a little bit more complicated. But yes. I would say, like for me personally, starting on hardware was how I learned it the quickest. I think if you just get yourself even something like, I mean, this is probably one of my favorite things right now, which is the Micro Freak, and this is like super cheap, like compared to other synths out there, and I feel like it has enough. Sorry,
Who makes the Microfreak?
that's Arturia.
Yeah, nice.
And it's got enough, functionality where you could like dive pretty deep. I think picking up hardware to learn synthesis is 100% the best way,
That's amazing.
and the quickest way.
That's
Yeah, I think
That's
I
my
also,
2 cents.
Frustrated.
I also, yeah, I also shared in the chat. It's called Helm. If in case like, I mean, look, hardware is, I agree with T. Hardware is the best way, and that's how I learned. Playing on mini Moogs, but those are hella expensive. If like you're talking about that kind of like hardware, like that's really expensive. But like if we're talking about like synthesis in terms of like oscillators, adding LFOs, seeing how all that stuff works. Helm is great, and it's open source and it's free. And I would really recommend it. I sent in the chat there. It's the titel.org link. But yeah, I mean, so hardware though is the best way, and it's also the most like the analog stuff will always give you the best stuff. Like anything you'll ever find, like if you play around with like a DX7 or like a Juno, like nothing like that. Like it's the best stuff in the world.
I have a question. Is everyone here from Toronto?
Where?
Is,
Huh?
is everyone here from Toronto?
No, I'm from LA.
Word.
Definitely not.
Word.
Anyone from Spain?
Washington D.C. for me.
Argentina?
I'm from Montreal, Quebec, but I go to school in Kingston, Ontario.
Quebecois.
Oui, je parle
From
français.
Australia.
I actually just got back from
Oh yeah.
Quebec.
What's up, man?
Oh, nice.
Where were you, Bilal?
I went to Quebec City. I was actually trying to get into the Atlantic bubble. So I went as far as I possibly could. So I went to Saguenay. I went to Grand Jardin. I went to I went to 4 national parks. I basically just went out there to climb mountains and shit. Yeah.
That's sick.
Cool, man.
Yo, Justin, I saw your Zabars hat, and I knew you're from New York, and I want that hat, man. So if you could, like, I will buy one off you.
I'm from Vancouver, but I have a lot of Jewish friends, so yeah, Zabars.
Nice.
That's me. I'm your new Jewish friend, bro. That's me. I want that hat. Oh my god.
Nice. Are you Justin? You live out in Vancouver?
No, New York.
New York. Cool.
Yeah.
I used to live in Vancouver before. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
This is awesome. Look at like the diversity here and just the geographical separation from all of us. Yet we all have this like niche in common. It's so awesome.
Yeah.
Yo, Adam, about your question about synthesis and stuff like that. Like I have some experience in it because I do a lot of electronic music. I started out really just I'm trying to think what was the name of it. I think it was called Synthwave or Wave Master or something like Synthwave Master. It was so lame to start with, but it taught me all the different types. It taught me wavetable. It taught me additive, subtractive, all that different stuff. Like you learned the different forms of it all within one, and it was almost overwhelming. So then I took a step back, and then I went into Massive. And Massive was very good because it taught you kind of the fundamentals of tweaking and learning all the different oscillators and how to automate those oscillators and stuff like that. So it was pretty cool doing that. And then now I think I use a lot of Serum actually, Serum and Massive. You kind of learn that different like synths and VSTs and stuff like that are good for different things. So like I feel like Serum's really good for making upper bass sounds and stuff like that, maybe like synths and a lot of oscillating if you want to modulate things in Ableton or Pro Tools. I guess the one thing I would say though is when doing synthesis, like who said that earlier? I think you said it, Bilal. You were saying like kind of pick 1 or 2 to go with. Like if you stick with 1 or 2 to go with, you can really kind of master them, lock them down, versus trying to learn too many all at once. Is all I was really going to say about it.
Well,
and YouTube is a huge help. Oh my god, dude, you can learn so much from YouTube.
Oh yeah. Well, to Terrence's point, he was absolutely on the ball with the fact that like there's the subtractive, and then there's also the FM. So if you look at Native Instruments, they have something called FM8. Mm-hmm. That's where you get like really, really technical with your modulators and stuff. It's like the it would be the equivalent of Max when it comes to synthesizers. I think that's one way to look at FM8. It gives you all that presets and everything, and then you can also deliberately go into every single sound and actually modulate like every single frequency within that sound and
But it's cool even just choosing, like, you learn the different types of like waveforms you're talking about before, like you're talking triangle signs and square. You have to like really break sounds down and understand what they do to it. Like, it's really cool. You just learn how passing through other modulators and stuff like that, how they can modulate a sound. You start to really think outside the box. Yeah.
You have sine waves that are soft and round and mellow, and then you have like square waves or like you have zigzag saws. Like there's a bunch of stuff that you look into. You can really see how certain sounds are made and whatnot. So
there's this Coursera class on music production that I took like years ago, and I mean, like I just like watched these videos and had them in the background. But I'd like been using and synthesizing stuff on my own, but it did a really good job of explaining like what subtractive synthesis is. And it kind of even went like, I thought this was fascinating, like woodwinds create like the natural equivalent of a square wave.
Nice.
The reed moves creates that. And then violins create like the saw wave. And so it's like, you can kind of see how like, it seems like there's all these different sounds, but there's really like 3. And like, we're just like reinterpreting it and kind of bending it. So yeah, I don't know. I thought that was really, that always makes things easier when it's not like too much shit out there. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I agree. Honestly, if you break it down and just understand those core fundamental things, then like synthesis, it just kind of like clicks. Once it clicks, then you just experiment until you figure out your thing. I swear, it's really like any of the guys you see on YouTube have been doing it because they've been doing it so long that they know when I turn this many semitones or I adjust this, to a triangle or a sine or a fuzzy sine, this is what it's going to give me. If I adjust this to a saw, this is what it's going to do. If I add 16 of these together and I put them in unison or I detune them, this is what it's going to sound like. It's really just learning the fundamentals and then just experiment the fuck out of it. Like it's so fun that way. But
if you guys wanna hear like absolute synth mastery, listen to a guy named EPROM, EPROM, and he's in a duo as well called Shades, which is him and Alex Perez. So Shades is in like sunglasses. But yeah, EPROM has fucking devilish like control, mastery of synthesis. Like if you ever want to get inspired and hear what synthesis sounds like to the max, I'll just type it out for you, Andrew.
Yeah.
EPROM, yeah. And
EPROM is dope.
Yeah, EPROM is dope. He's really, really, really awesome when it comes to synthesis. And you can hear everything from like sine to square to saws. Like you hear everything, and it's like, yeah, it's nice. And he's from I think he's in San Fernando. Yeah. So.
Also, granular synthesis is super.
Yes.
Super dope. So I just like got hip to this recently, but there's like an Ableton add-on that's pretty easy. But for example, like this is super lazy for me, but I have songs where I just played out guitar chords and then just printed them with whatever amp and then thrown them into like a different instance of that. And so I just play C on each one and it does the chord progression. And then I can fuck it up and it could sound like all kinds of wild. People are like, how the fuck did you do that? And it was very like, I barely used my brain. So, highly recommend that. Because like Massive, and like I used to spend like a fucking hour designing like some crazy synth on Massive. But like, it's kind of like, it's more about feeling than it is like hyper exacting any kind of thing, which like, that's the thing about the YouTube guys. It's like, I love looking at tutorials of how somebody would approach making something. But half the time I look at the tutorial, I'm like, yo, this track does not feel anywhere close to as good as the original. And I get like technically you're matching everything, but like the vibe isn't there.
But to your point, that 1 hour you took to program Massive, you probably learned a shit ton in doing
Yeah.
That's the point that I was trying to get to earlier. It's like you want to learn, pick up Massive, fuck around with it for an hour, you will learn a fuck ton about synthesis just by doing so.
For sure. The basics and then fuck around. It's honestly, that's why I feel like that's kind of what music's been from the beginning. Like you learn a few basic chords and you fuck around. Like that's just music in my opinion.
Yeah.
Everybody has their different approach, but
no, that's spot on.
If only fucking around paid the bills.
You're right.
That's all it is.
I find for like soft synths, especially, I I've been like trying to venture more into like blending like the noise oscillator with like, you know, kind of the basic shapes and that sort of thing, and getting like new textures and new details just by, you know, simple layering with some like noise, or you can add some cool attack noise to plucks and that sort of thing. And I find that's something I've neglected in the past, and it's something that I can really like take advantage of. I've realized now, especially in like something like Serum, which is so clean and even it just sounds a bit too clean and a bit too like, I don't know how to describe it, like a bit thin.
Like Ghost in the Machine kind of feel, right? Like
Yeah.
you miss that analog kind of warmth in Serum a little bit.
Definitely, yeah. I just think that like giving some sort of artifact or just something like a texture to that just would make it. It just makes that kind of 10% extra. Like I feel like that's, you know, something I've neglected, and I feel like sharing that sounds like a, you know, something that would help people with synthesis and whatnot. So
absolutely.
So to honestly, saturation and things like that, like adding in intentional like fuzz or effects, that really helps a lot of times, especially with bass. Like I found like cutting through like with small speakers, like a lot of times that was the hardest thing when I first started out making like bass sounds and 808s and stuff like that, is learning how to make that upper saturation, like what you're saying, like that fuzz or that thickness or that presence. Like it was so tough learning how to just add just a little bit of it to cut through a mix without overpowering the actual bass sound. So like saturation definitely helps.
Total game changing for that like higher end stuff was when Retro Color came out, RC20. You guys use that?
Oh, of course.
So Retro Color, it has this feature where you can add noise, right? But instead of just adding noise, like throughout the sound, you can make it follow. When the sound actually engages, it'll add the noise. And then you can change the type of noise. So you can have like a vinyl, you can have like a white noise.
RC20 is a game changer.
Yeah. So like that was the first time where I was like, I can make things sound sampled without like adding a vinyl sample by hand that I'm constantly like chopping up and like layering over the sound. It just becomes part of the sound. So if you guys don't use that, you definitely should.
I'm pretty sure everyone on the planet has that plugin by now.
I mean, they might.
Honestly, it's so good.
Yeah.
It takes self-control not to throw it on everything.
Yeah,
I don't know if there's any problem with using it on everything depending, as long as you know why you're using it. Like, I use it as just an EQ all the time. I love like EQs that are like a tone knob and then like a high and low cutoff. Like same with Decapitator. Like anytime I have like a dark to bright and all that, because it just makes everything easier. You don't have to overthink like how you can tune something.
Yeah.
Well,
I don't think there's like any problem with like you know, like everyone using RC20 either. Like I feel like, you know, it's a really cool plugin that gives like everything like a bit more warmth. But I don't know. I kind of want to go past the stigma of like, oh, like everyone's doing this, so you can't do that. You know, I've kind of gone through a bit of a developing stage in my I guess in my time as a producer, where I've realized that like it doesn't really matter like if you're doing the same thing as someone else, because the ears that will listen to that song are going to be they're not going to know what you're using or what you're doing, or you know where you got it from, where you got the samples from, or where you know what plugin you're using. That person's not going to know. They're not even going to, you know, they probably won't find out. So I feel like there's a kind of like a stigma around about like, oh, you know, you can't do this because someone else has done it. And I just feel like it's total like bullshit in my opinion. But
Julian, you brought it full circle. That was like the most full circle moment, because we started off talking about DAWs and the recognition of sounds between them, and when it comes down to the product and when it comes down to the end result, it comes down to, does this sound cool? Does this sound enjoyable? And does it push the envelope? But none of us really care how it was brought there. Maybe we do. Maybe we as producers and our curiosities bring us there. But if you have an end result that is, just undeniable, everything else is just bonus. Everything else is just that extra, oh, this is the cool ingredient. This is how this came to be. But we can all celebrate the final result. And I think you said it very eloquently in that.
Couple years ago, Lensmaster was here from the UK and from the Netherlands, and we went out for dinner with him afterwards, and I was like, dude, like there's this one track by you that I just fucking fell in love with a long time ago, and he was just and I was like, what did you use? Like, what kind of stuff did you use to make this track? Blah, blah, blah. He's like, dude, I honestly just used my regular iPod headphones and Ableton, and that's it. And that was a very humbling experience, because I think we get too caught up in like having the top of the line equipment, top of the line synths, these DAWs battles and whatnot, and all this shit. And I'm just like, dude, at the end of the day, whatever channels your creativity down to the final product, and if you like the final product, it doesn't even matter if somebody else likes it or not. If somebody likes it, that's a bonus on top of it. But if you like the end product and somebody else also likes the end product, your mission is done. Like, you've done what you had to do, and I think you created something really awesome that somebody enjoys, and all the power to you. Like, you just did it on your iPod headphones. Big whoop. Right. If anything, you made something so bomb on your iPod headphones that somebody else needed to utilize like fucking studio grade equipment to do that. I mean, in my mind, you're more technical than the other person in that case.
It's changing the narrative, breaking the mold, putting ourselves in the forefront, and letting creativity lead the way rather than like barriers and formalities
and
like
stigmas and formalities, and this goes back to that point we were talking about, like how do you make something that still allows you to get society to be all into your music and whatnot. Just fucking do your own thing, just do it. Like, I think anybody who you'd be surprised, in my opinion, especially if you're not like a big time rapper, producer, artist, that people have familiarized themselves with your sound. I think that if you are small time, that is the best time to actually experiment as much as you can, because people have not really tied you to a particular sound. And as you evolve as an artist, you'd be surprised to really learn how many people are actually out there looking for really unique music. People think that, no, people just want the regular 4x4. Not really, man. Like, there's people out there that are really looking for some really eccentric, weird, new, experimental shit. And I think we kind of just fall into our own traps, thinking that we need to make it a certain way so that you don't know what people want. You don't know what people want. Just make something and just see the response, and you'll truly understand. In Jamaica, they used to have sound system culture. Well, they still have it. It's a big thing over there, where it's you cut a dub plate, and it's cut on acetate, and it can only be spun 30 times before the needle really plucks up the groove, right? So what they would do is they would go to these sound clashes, because the sound clash was not only about the music, it was also about the sound systems and how they can just completely unite people and crush another sound system. They would battle, that would be their equivalent of DAWs battles. And what they would do is they would play a dub plate 30 times max, and if they see the response of the crowd is just, whose noise is that? Does somebody have, I think, Nevin, is that you?
Maybe. What's the noise sound like?
Can you mute for a sec? Yeah, it was you. Yeah. It's like background noise. Yeah. But yeah, so they would play that stuff. And if the crowd goes wild, that's how they know that they're going to go ahead and cut that as an album, as a piece for the album, or as an actual track. Right, and you never know what people want until you actually make something weird and let people listen to it. You're like, yo, I actually like the direction you're going in. So that's just my thoughts on it.
Yeah, I mean, if you, sorry.
No, go for it, Adam. Say what you were gonna say.
I was just say, if you're looking for someone who like just to listen to someone like a great example of what you just said, Bilal, is someone named Breakins. Very very interesting production. Like he's 18, does everything himself, like produces everything himself, and his production is crazy. Like he manages to incorporate like glitchy electronic sounds into a hip hop and punk vibe, and it's still beyond me. And honestly, it's to the point where his production is so unique and so impressive that it actually, I feel like it set me back because I got insecure by my own production. It's crazy because of the fact that he's
that's good. That's good. 100%.
Oh, 100%. Oh,
100%,
it gives me motivation, but
Exactly.
it's the fact that he's 2 years younger than me and his production is off the rockers, bro. It's insane. I really recommend you guys check him out.
100%.
It's really interesting. So yeah, somewhat about that. Like you were saying, if you just put out your shit and you're like I mean, this guy's putting out stuff that's like it's not normal, like not like mainstream at all, and he's like breaking through. Do you know what I mean? So that's a great example of that. Like I think that's great.
Like that's a very like I'm in the tech world, and like in startups we talk about like pivoting, and we talk about like putting out product first and actually seeing what the response is, how the market actually does that. It's actually completely the exact same thing when it comes to music production, because you're kind of like a startup. You're like a company that's putting out a product, and you want to see what the response of the market is to that, and then pivot or adjust accordingly, right? Like we think that the market wants a particular thing, and then we go ahead and build it, and then realize that fuck, it's a dud. Nobody wants
it. It's so fluid. Yeah, it really, and honestly, like I think what's very very underrated is just the concept of like making the kind of music that you want. And this is why I kind of stay away from type beats. Is like, I mean, I don't really make hip hop, and like I'm not really in that era. But the reason I'm not particularly like I don't chase after that whole idea of making type beats is because I think developing your own sound is just really the only way that you can like achieve any semblance of like I don't know, like satisfaction. Yeah. So it's and I think that like it's very very underrated, just the whole idea of creating what you like. And I honestly believe that if you create what you love, people will just like
boom
start to like follow.
Boom.
Because it's like
boom.
yeah
boom. And 100%, like that's exactly the point I'm trying to get to.
The audience will find.
I personally don't believe, like it might sound very contrarian to say this, but I personally don't believe in genres anymore. We are now living in 2020 where
too overrated.
Genres are so overrated, and I believe, my personal opinion, I believe genre bending has become much more easier now, and I don't think people are there. I don't think there are enough people out there in the world taking advantage of that. Not only that, if we are going to put out genres, I think there's, in my honest opinion, I believe there's only two genres. It's either good music or bad music. That's it. That's it. That's the only two.
Real. It's, and I was gonna say like that, but I felt like it was too cliche. But I'm really happy you said that. Like, fuck genres. The whole idea.
Dude, genres are so fucking overrated. Like you know, so funny when somebody asked me, they're like, "Yo, what genre do you produce?" And I was like, I remember getting so hung up on that. I'm like, I could tell you what I tried to produce yesterday, but it's not the same thing I tried to produce the day before yesterday. So like, I don't know what to tell you, but I can tell you what BPMs I really fuck around with. And they're like, oh, and I was like, yeah. Like, I look at it that way. I look at it defining your music should be so different. Like, if you're trying to really put yourself in a genre, like all of a sudden you're like, okay, I make hip hop. Well, now you're all of a sudden tied to like this whole hip hop mentality. Not you personally are tied to it, but the other person now thinks of you as a hip hop producer, and then all of a sudden they're like, "Yo, let's get you in the studio with a hip hop, person." And I'm just like, "Wait a minute, but I don't really produce that kind of shit. I just produce good music." Like I've had situations where I've just like been in studios and we're just like chilling out and having drinks and whatever after a session, and I'm just like, "Yo, can I just like test a track right now?" And I just go ahead and plug it in and test the track, and they're like, "Yo, this is sick. Who is this?" And I was like, "It's me. I just made this day before yesterday." And I was like, "I just want to hear this." And then I've had people literally who just finished the session. They're like, "Yo, can we just go back in the studio and actually start to rap on this or do something on this?" I was like, "Go for it, man. Like, just mix and match things and like really get weird with your music." And I think like if you're getting too stuck up on like a genre or a certain BPM or a certain sound or a certain tool or DAW, whatever, right? Like, I don't know. Like I
I'll
can't.
say though, at the same time though, I feel like someone who makes a lot of electronic music and I DJ as well, I think it's important to have intention with your music. So sometimes like something gets labeled as dance as like almost like a genre or whatever, like it has the intention of dancing. So like you almost have to have that intent when you go to make the music sometimes. So like I think it's very like it depends on what world you're in and what you're using your music for. You know, if it's sync placement or something like that, like you know what I mean? Like everything should have some type of intention.
Yeah, yeah, no, yeah.
I mean,
yeah. Adam,
I was just gonna say I do think 100% dance like because people like to expect things, right? I mean, people like to know what they're getting. So if you say dance, like they know you can play it in a club. Personally, I'm gonna just say Joji's new album, super depressing, and I dance to it. Like, so it's like, do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
like I will dance to anything alone in my room all the time. But I also wanted to say that like in general, I mean, it's just I feel like the best way to describe it is like if someone were to ask me like how he would describe my music, I just wouldn't. I just said like I wouldn't describe it because I don't know how to.
Just
so,
listen
like,
to it. Yeah,
just listen to it. Exactly, that's the best way. So you always have a track ready. Just always pull out your Walkman. I don't know if people still use it. No, I'm kidding. But,
I feel like artists shouldn't be put into genres, but songs should. You know what I mean? That's how I feel about genres. I feel like a genre should exist for organizing music, not.
That's
artists.
a great
But
point.
let me ask you this then. Okay, so how many people in here are James Blake fans?
Bro, pull me up.
So let me tell you this.
Happy belated, by the way.
You gotta tell me something.
So James Blake, when he was first starting out, he was here. He came out in Toronto. He came out to Toronto, played at Wrong Bar, and this is when he was a nobody. Like this is because like I love RNS Records, and the thing is that RNS Records has always been at the forefront of doing really really weird sound. And the thing is that when he was here, I was just hanging out with him, and I remember asking him the same thing too. I was just like, "Yo, like, where do you feel like your music is gonna go?" And he was just like, "Yo, I'm just trying to take it in whatever direction I possibly can." And this is when he was a nobody, right? You look at it now. What is James Blake doing? James Blake has
producer for the biggest guys, bro.
Well, not only that, but look at James Blake's own sound. Look at the shit that he does with Travis Scott. Look at the shit he's done with Beyonce. The guy's a producer. Period. He just makes music. He's good, and he sings and whatnot. Like that's how you realize that genres are fucking trash. You think he's making music with Travis Scott and the shit that he's making himself? Does that make him a hip hop producer? Fuck no.
And I mean, here, like, I mean, yeah, like someone said here in the chat. I mean, his shit on Astroworld is so good, and you take that, and then on the other side, complete other side, you have the stuff he wrote on, like Godspeed.
Wilhelm Scream. There you go. Wilhelm Scream is another one of his tracks. Like, how do you compare those two? That's a fucking different. And then you have a tune that he has a tune with Trim. That tune itself, like, what do you define? And keep in mind, he's from the UK. He's done stuff in grime. He's done stuff in hip hop. He's done stuff in electronic. He's done stuff in dubstep. He's done stuff in electronica. He's done stuff in like vocals. Like, what? Okay, period.
By the way, that's how you know. But that's how you know he like just straight up loves music. By the way, like that's when you know you're passionate about music is when it doesn't even matter what you're doing as long as you're making it.
And it's going to be a banger.
I think that's why he's such an inspiration.
And it's going to be a banger.